Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Starbound and stared at the view screen. What he saw made no sense. Pieces of metal and strange materials floated in space like a graveyard. The debris field stretched as far as their sensors could reach. Some chunks were as big as cities. Others sparkled like broken glass in the starlight. "How long has this been here?" Jake asked his science officer. Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her console. Her face was pale. "The computer says about 200 years, Captain." "But that's impossible." Jake walked closer to the screen. 200 years ago, humans had just started exploring their own solar system. They barely had ships that could reach Mars. Yet here was evidence of a massive space battle that happened right around that time. "Take us closer," Jake ordered, "but keep the shields up." The Starbound moved slowly through the debris field. Lisa worked at her station, scanning everything they passed. The ship's computer tried to identify the materials, but most of them were unknown to human science. "Captain, you need to see this," Lisa said. Her voice shook slightly. Jake looked at her screen. The scanner had found something buried deep in a large piece of wreckage. It looked like a data storage device, but it was made from materials that shouldn't exist. "Can we bring it aboard?" Jake asked. Lisa nodded. "The scanning bay should be safe enough." 20 minutes later, Jake and Lisa stood in the scanning bay, looking at the strange device. It was about the size of a book, but it seemed to shift colors when they weren't looking directly at it. Strange symbols covered its surface. "I've never seen writing like this," Lisa said. "But the computer thinks it might be some kind of memory device." Jake reached out to touch it, then pulled his hand back. Something about the device made him uncomfortable. It felt dangerous, even though it just sat there doing nothing. "Run every scan you can," Jake said, "but don't try to activate it yet." While Lisa worked, Jake returned to the bridge. His communications officer, Lieutenant Ben Parker, was waiting for him with a worried expression. "Captain, we're getting reports from other ships," Ben said. 17 exploration fleets have found similar debris fields, all of them about 200 years old. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. 17? How is that possible? Ben handed him a data pad. "They're all in a sphere around Earth, sir. About 200 light years in every direction. Each fleet found the same thing: massive battles, complete destruction of at least one civilization." Jake studied the reports. Every fleet described the same pattern. 2 different types of technology in the wreckage. One type was beautiful, made of crystal-like materials that seemed to bend light. The other type was ugly and brutal, designed only for destruction. "Sir, there's something else," Ben said quietly. "Every site has the same symbol carved into the largest pieces of debris." Ben showed Jake an image on the datapad. The symbol was simple but disturbing. It looked like a circle with lines through it, but something about it made Jake's hands shake. Several crew members had reported nightmares after seeing it. Jake was about to respond when Lisa's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Captain, please come to the scanning bay immediately. You need to see this." Jake hurried back to find Lisa staring at her computer screen in shock. The strange device was now glowing softly, and symbols appeared in the air above it. "I didn't activate it," Lisa said quickly. "It just started working on its own when I ran a DNA scan." "DNA scan? Why would you do that?" Lisa pointed to her screen. "Because I found human DNA in the wreckage, Captain. Not just traces, lots of it, and it's been modified somehow." Jake looked at the floating symbols. As he watched, they began to change, shifting into letters he could read. The message was short but terrifying. "Warning, they took our children. We made sure no one would ever take our children again. What you see here is what happens when you make humans angry. Learn from." Remember this. Do not repeat their mistake." A message faded, and new symbols appeared. These showed images, holographic pictures that moved like old movies. Jake and Lisa watched in horror as the images showed beautiful crystal beings attacking human settlements. They saw human children being taken away in strange ships. Then the images changed. They showed humans building weapons that seemed impossible, ships that could appear and disappear, guns that could destroy planets, humans with eyes that glowed with cold fury. The final image showed the crystal beings' homeworld being torn apart piece by piece, but it wasn't random destruction. It was careful, methodical. The humans weren't just destroying their enemy. They were erasing them from existence. "Captain," Lisa whispered, "according to Earth's records, there was a 47-day period in 2156 when all deep space monitoring went dark. No one ever explained what happened." Jake stared at the images. "And this destruction happened around the same time." The device suddenly went dark. The symbols vanished, leaving Jake and Lisa alone with their thoughts. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "How many humans were involved in this?" Lisa checked her scanner readings. "The DNA. Evidence suggests thousands, maybe tens of thousands. But Captain, according to our records, all those people were on Earth during that time period. They never left the solar system." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. If the records were true, then humans had somehow traveled hundreds of light years, fought a war that destroyed an entire civilization, and returned home, all in 47 days. With technology they shouldn't have had. "Send a message to Earth," Jake ordered. "Tell them we need to speak with Admiral Kevin Hayes immediately." "And Ben?" "Yes, sir?" "Make it clear this is not a routine report. Something happened 200 years ago, and we need to know what it was." As Jake left the scanning bay, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled onto something that was meant to stay buried. A universe was full of mysteries, but this one felt dangerous. Behind him, the strange device sat silent and dark. But sometimes, when no one was looking, the symbols on its surface seemed to flicker, as if it was waiting for something. 3 months had passed since Captain Jake Morrison first discovered the debris field. Now Commander Amy Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her ship, the Pathfinder, looking at something that should not exist. The structure floating in space before them was enormous. It was clearly built by humans, but it used technology that was centuries ahead of anything Earth possessed. The metal was smooth and black, and it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange energy patterns flowed across its surface like living things. "How big is it?" Amy asked her navigator. Lieutenant Carl Johnson checked his instruments. "About the size of a small city, Commander. But the strange part is, it's not showing up on long-range scans. We only saw it when we got within a few thousand kilometers." Amy had been chosen to lead this joint task force because she was known for staying calm under pressure. But looking at this structure, she felt anything but calm. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Any signs of life?" she asked. Her science officer, Dr. Susan Miller, shook her head. "No life signs, but there's definitely power running through it. Whatever built this, they wanted it to last." Amy made her decision. Prepare a boarding party. Full environmental suits and weapons. We're going inside. 2 hours later, Amy floated through the corridors of the alien structure with 5 other crew members. The walls were covered with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows that seemed to move on their own. "Commander, over here," called Sergeant Pete Davis, the team security chief. He was standing in front of a large circular room. Amy joined him and gasped. The room was filled with holographic projectors, and in the center stood the image of A man in a military uniform. He looked perfectly human, but his eyes held a coldness that made Amy shiver. As they entered the room, the hologram activated. The man's image turned to look at them directly. "If you're seeing this, then you've found one of our memorials," the hologram said. His voice was calm, but carried an undertone of barely controlled anger. "My name is Colonel Danny Miller. According to your records, I died peacefully in my sleep in 2157. That's a lie." Amy and her team stood frozen as the hologram continued. In 2156, humanity made first contact with a species we came to call the Zephyrians. They were beautiful beings, made of living crystal, and they seemed peaceful at first. They told us they were explorers, just like us. They offered to share knowledge and culture. The hologram's expression darkened. What they didn't tell us was their favorite hobby. You see, the Zephyrians were ancient and powerful, but they were also bored. For thousands of years, they had been collecting younger species and using them for entertainment, gladiatorial games, blood sports. They would take the strongest, the smartest, the most promising individuals and make them fight for Zephyrian amusement. Amy felt sick to her stomach. The hologram seemed to notice her reaction. "Yes, it gets worse," Danny Miller's image said. "The Zephyrians had been watching humanity for decades. They decided we would make excellent subjects for their games. They started small, taking people from remote locations where they wouldn't be missed immediately." The room filled with new holograms. Images of humans being taken from their homes, from research stations, from ships traveling between planets. Amy watched in horror as families were torn apart by crystal beings who moved like living light. "But then they made a mistake," Miller continued, and his voice became deadly quiet. "They took a group of children on a school trip to Luna Station. 47 kids, ages 8 to 16. Among them was the daughter of General Patricia Brooks." Amy knew that name. Patricia Brooks was a legend in military history, known for her tactical genius and absolute dedication to protecting civilians. "General Brooks was Earth's most decorated commander," Miller said. "She had spent her entire career making sure no harm came to innocent people. When she learned that aliens had taken her daughter, along with 46 other children, something broke inside her. But it wasn't just her. It was all of us." The holograms changed, showing images of Earth during those 47 days in 2156. But this wasn't the Earth Amy knew from history books. This Earth was a world at war, building weapons and ships at an impossible pace. You see, when the Zephyrians took our children, they awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping for a very long time, Miller explained. Suddenly, we remembered things we had forgotten, technologies that had been locked away in our genetic code, abilities we didn't know we possessed. Amy watched as the hologram showed humans building ships that could fold space, weapons that could crack planets, and armor that made soldiers nearly invincible. The construction was happening everywhere on Earth simultaneously, as if the entire human race had suddenly become a single military machine. The 47-day silence wasn't a system malfunction, Miller said. It was humanity going dark. While we prepared for war, we built a fleet that could travel faster than light without using traditional methods. We developed weapons that could destroy matter at the quantum level. And we did it all in less than 7 weeks. Dr. Susan Miller, who had been silent until now, found her voice. That's impossible. The technology, the resources, the coordination required. The hologram of Danny Miller smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Nothing is impossible when you make humanity truly angry, especially when you threaten our children. The images changed again, showing human fleets appearing around Zephyrian worlds. But these weren't rescue missions. The humans weren't trying to negotiate or demand the return of their children. We found their homeworld first, Miller said. Beautiful place, made entirely of living crystal that sang when the wind blew through it. The Zephyrians tried to greet us as friends. They even offered to return the children they had taken, claiming it had all been a misunderstanding. Amy held her breath, hoping the story would take a peaceful turn. General Brooks' response was recorded for posterity, Miller continued. She said, "You don't understand. This isn't about getting our people back anymore. This is about making. Sure, the universe understands what happens when you make humanity angry." The final hologram showed the Zephyrian homeworld being systematically destroyed. Not blown up in a moment of rage, but carefully, methodically taken apart piece by piece. The humans weren't just killing their enemies. They were erasing them. "We didn't just destroy the Zephyrians," Miller said as his image began to fade. "We destroyed everything they had ever built, everyone they had ever been, and everything they had ever dreamed of becoming. We made sure that no trace of their civilization would remain to inspire others to follow their example." The hologram looked directly at Amy. "If you're here, then you've found the evidence we left behind. Consider it a warning. Humanity is not what it seems. We appear peaceful because we choose to be peaceful, but that choice can be taken away." The image of Colonel Danny Miller disappeared, leaving Amy and her team alone in the dark chamber. For several minutes, no one spoke. Finally, Sergeant Davis broke the silence. "Commander, should we report this to Earth?" Amy looked around the chamber, thinking about the implications of what they had just learned. Humanity had capabilities they didn't know about, technologies that could destroy entire civilizations, and it had all been triggered by someone threatening. "Human children. Yes," she said quietly, "but we're going to need to be very careful about how we present this information." As they prepared to leave the structure, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that they had just opened a door that should have stayed closed. Commander Amy Rodriguez had found 17 more memorial sites in the past month. Each one told the same horrifying story, but from different perspectives. Now she stood in the largest memorial they had discovered, deep in what used to be Zephyrian space. This memorial was different from the others. It was built inside what remained of a Zephyrian city, and the human structures had been integrated with the alien architecture in disturbing ways. Crystal spires that once sang with alien music now housed human technology that hummed with barely contained power. "The hologram system is more advanced here," reported Dr. Susan Miller as she worked at a control console. "It can show us multiple perspectives simultaneously." Amy nodded. "Activate it. We need to understand what really happened here." The chamber filled with light, and suddenly they were surrounded by holograms of human officers. These weren't recordings like the others. These seemed to be actual interactive programs, designed to answer questions and provide detailed explanations. The first hologram to speak was a man in a Navy uniform. "I am Captain Steve Johnson, commander of the 5th Destruction Fleet. You want to know about the scope of the operation." Amy looked around at her team. They had all seen the previous memorials, but this felt different, more organized, more deliberate. "Tell us," Amy said to the hologram. Captain Johnson's image gestured, and the room filled with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red dots appeared, marking Zephyrian territories. There were thousands of them. The Zephyrians had been expanding for over 50,000 years, Johnson explained. They had colonies in 17 different star systems, research stations in hundreds of locations, and trade relationships with 43 other species. They were one of the most successful civilizations in galactic history. The red dots began disappearing one by one as Johnson continued. "It took us 6 months to find them all. 6 months to track down every colony, every outpost, every ship, every individual Zephyrian in the galaxy. We were very thorough." Amy felt sick. "You killed them all?" A new hologram appeared, a woman in a medical uniform. I am Dr. Helen Parker, xenobiologist for the Extermination Project. We didn't just kill them, Commander. We unraveled them from existence." Dr. Parker waved her hand, and the room filled with images of technology that made no sense to Amy, machines that seemed to operate on principles that violated everything she knew about physics. "We developed quantum archaeological techniques," Dr. Parker explained. "Technology that could trace the quantum signature of any individual or object backwards through time. We could find every Zephyrian that had ever lived, every building they had ever constructed, every idea they had ever shared with other species." Amy stared at the impossible machines. "That's not possible. You can't change the past." Dr. Parker smiled coldly. "We didn't change it. We edited it. We removed the Zephyrians' influence on causality itself. Every contribution they had made to galactic civilization was systematically undone. Every species they had helped was made to forget they had ever received that help. Every technological advance they had shared was erased from history." The room filled with new images, other alien species suddenly forgetting languages they had learned, technologies they had built, even memories of conversations they had had with Zephyrians. It was like watching reality itself being rewritten. But why? Amy asked. "The children they took, surely you could have negotiated for their return." A third hologram appeared, a tall man in general's uniform. "I am Admiral Tony Garcia, Commander of the Final Solution Fleet. The children were returned to us within the first week of the war." Amy felt a moment of relief, then dread as she realized what that meant. "You continued the war even after getting the children back?" Admiral Garcia nodded. "The Zephyrians tried to surrender after we destroyed their first 10 colonies. They offered to return all human captives, pay reparations, and sign treaties guaranteeing they would never interfere with humanity again." "And you refused?" Garcia's expression became something that barely looked human. "You don't understand. This was never about rescue. This was about making sure the universe understands what happens when you make humanity angry. When you threaten our children." The room filled with images of Zephyrian leaders trying to negotiate, offering everything they had in exchange for peace. Amy watched human commanders rejecting every offer, demanding nothing less than complete extinction. "We hunted down every species the Zephyrians had ever contacted," Garcia continued. "Every historical record, every cultural exchange, every diplomatic relationship. We systematically destroyed archaeological sites on hundreds of worlds. We manipulated other species' memories using advanced psychic technology. We even altered the quantum structure of space itself to remove traces of Zephyrian existence." Amy looked around at her team. They all wore expressions of horror and disbelief. "The most difficult part," said a new hologram, a woman in scientists' robes, "was ensuring that enough evidence remained to serve as a warning." The woman introduced herself as Dr. Margaret Lewis, chief architect of the Memorial Project. "We couldn't erase the Zephyrians completely, because then no one would know what happens when humanity is threatened. So we carefully preserved just enough evidence to tell the story, while ensuring that the Zephyrians themselves were gone forever." Amy realized what they were looking at. These memorials aren't just records. They're proof that humanity has done this before. Dr. Lewis nodded. "And they're a promise that we'll do it again if necessary." The holograms began to fade, but Admiral Garcia's image remained. "Commander Rodriguez, you're here because humanity's children are spreading across the galaxy again. New colonies, new exploration fleets, new generations being born among the stars." Amy felt cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the quantum archaeological technology we developed didn't just work on the past. It works on the future too. We've seen the probabilities. Other species will threaten humanity again. It's inevitable. The final image showed Amy herself, standing in this very chamber. But in the image, she was wearing a different uniform, one she didn't recognize, and her eyes held the same cold fury she had seen in all the other human commanders. When that time comes, Garcia said as his image faded, you'll remember this conversation. You'll remember what humanity is truly capable of. And you'll do what needs to be done. The chamber went dark, leaving Amy and her team alone with their thoughts. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Dr. Miller broke the silence. Commander, we need to report this to Earth Command. Amy nodded slowly. Yes, but first, I want you to run a scan on the quantum archaeological technology they showed us. Why? Amy looked around the chamber one more time. Because I want to know if it's still active. I want to know if somewhere in human space, those machines are still running, still watching, still waiting for the next species to make the same mistake the Zephyrians made. As they prepared to leave the memorial, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just discovering history. They were discovering humanity's true nature, and it was more terrifying than any alien threat they might ever face. The universe was vast and full of dangers. But the most dangerous thing in it, Amy realized, might be humanity itself when pushed too far. Commander Amy Rodriguez stood at the edge of what used to be the Zephyrian homeworld. Instead of a planet, there was now a perfect spiral of matter orbiting a black hole that pulsed with unnatural rhythms. The spiral formed letters that could be read from light years away, spelling out a message in gravitational waves that any spacefaring species would eventually detect. Remember what happens to those who threaten our children. Amy's navigator, Lieutenant Carl Johnson, checked his instruments with shaking hands. Commander, this isn't a natural black hole. The star was artificially aged. Someone accelerated. Billions of years of stellar evolution in a matter of months. Dr. Susan Miller looked up from her science station, her face pale. The orbital mechanics are impossible too. Those planetary fragments should have fallen into the black hole eons ago, but they're being held in place by some kind of artificial gravity field. Amy stared at the display. The technology required to do this was beyond anything humanity possessed, or at least anything she thought humanity possessed. How long would this message last? She asked. Dr. Miller ran calculations on her computer. The gravitational waves will be detectable for millions of years, maybe longer. Anyone who develops space travel in this region of the galaxy will eventually find this message. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just destruction. It was a permanent monument to human fury designed to warn alien civilizations for millions of years into the future. Commander, I'm detecting something else, Dr. Miller said. There's a structure hidden inside the accretion disk of the black hole. It's heavily shielded, but it's definitely artificial. Amy made the decision. That would change everything. Take us closer. Full shields, all precautions. The journey toward the black hole took 6 hours, with their ship fighting against gravitational forces that should have been impossible to survive. But as they got closer, Amy realized that the path they were following had been deliberately designed. Someone had created a safe corridor through the deadly radiation and twisted space-time. The structure they found was the largest memorial yet, a vast complex built from materials that bent space around them. Unlike the other memorials, this one was still fully active, with lights and energy patterns flowing through its corridors like blood through veins. I'm reading massive quantum processing systems, Dr. Miller reported. This isn't just a memorial. It's some kind of active computer network. Amy assembled her largest boarding party yet, 12 crew members with full military equipment. As they entered the structure, they found something that defied all their expectations. The corridors were filled with ghosts, not actual spirits. but holographic recordings of every human who had participated in the destruction of the Zephyrians. Thousands of people, all preserved in perfect detail, going about their daily routines as if the war was still happening. "These aren't just recordings," whispered Sergeant Pete Davis. "They're interactive. They're responding to our presence." A holographic woman in general's uniform approached them. Amy recognized her immediately from historical records. General Patricia Brooks, a woman whose daughter's kidnapping had started the war. "Commander Rodriguez," General Brooks said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "We've been waiting for you." Amy tried to keep her voice steady. "Waiting for me? How is that possible?" General Brooks smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "Because we've been watching your investigation since it began. Every memorial you visited, every piece of evidence you've uncovered, it was all designed to lead you here." The corridor filled with more holograms. Amy recognized some of them from the previous memorials: Colonel Danny Miller, Captain Steve Johnson, Dr. Helen Parker. But there were hundreds of others, all watching her with expressions of grim satisfaction. "You want to know the truth about what we did," General Brooks continued. "The complete truth." Amy nodded, though part of her was terrified to learn more. Brooks gestured, and the walls around them became transparent, revealing the vast quantum processing systems that filled the structure. "What we showed you in the other memorials was only part of the story. The Zephyrians weren't just destroyed. They were edited out of causality itself." Dr. Miller stepped forward. "That's impossible. You can't change the fundamental structure of reality." General Brooks turned to look at her. "Can't we? Tell me, Dr. Miller, what do you know about humanity's true origins?" The question caught Amy off guard. "Our origins? We evolved on Earth from earlier primates." "That's what your textbooks say," Brooks agreed. "But it's not the complete truth. Humanity didn't evolve on Earth. We returned to Earth." The quantum processors around them hummed louder, and suddenly the chamber filled with images of space, not the space around Earth, but vast regions of the galaxy that Amy didn't recognize. "Millions of years ago, humanity was already a spacefaring civilization," Brooks explained. "We had colonies throughout the galaxy, technologies that could reshape matter and energy at will, and capabilities that your current science considers impossible." Amy stared at the images. They showed humans, unmistakably human, building structures that dwarfed entire star systems and commanding technologies that treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions. "What happened to them?" Amy asked. "We learned that power without wisdom leads to destruction," Brooks said. "Our ancestors nearly destroyed the galaxy in a war that lasted for millennia. When it ended, they made a decision that saved the universe. They chose to start over." The images changed, showing humans voluntarily destroying their own technology and scattering themselves across thousands of worlds. Most chose to forget their origins entirely, becoming primitive hunter-gatherers who would have to rediscover civilization from the beginning. "But they kept safeguards," Brooks continued. "Genetic locks that would preserve their knowledge until it was needed again. Dormant capabilities that would awaken only when humanity faced a truly existential threat." Amy began to understand. The Zephyrians triggered those safeguards, not just by threatening us, Brooks said, by threatening our children. That was the one trigger our ancestors built into every safeguard. Anyone who harms human children awakens the full fury of our species. The holograms around them began to change, showing not just the destruction of the Zephyrians, but the awakening of dormant human capabilities across the galaxy. Suddenly, humans on distant worlds were remembering technologies they had never learned, building weapons from designs that appeared in their dreams, and coordinating their actions across impossible distances. The 47-day silence wasn't just Earth going dark, Brooks explained. It was every human colony, every human ship, Every human settlement in the galaxy suddenly reconnecting to a network that had been dormant for millions of years. Doctor. Miller found her voice. The other human colonies that were established before Earth achieved spaceflight, they were already connected to this network? Brooks nodded. Humanity has been spread across the galaxy far longer than your historians realize. When the Zephyrians threatened our children, every human in the galaxy felt it. Every human in the galaxy responded. The final revelation came when General Brooks led them to the center of the structure. There, floating in a sphere of twisted space-time, was a single object that made Amy's mind struggle to comprehend what she was seeing. It was a device that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, constantly shifting between states of matter and energy. Symbols flowed across its surface in languages that predated human civilization by millions of years. This is the heart of memory, Brooks said. It contains the complete history and capabilities of our species. Every technology we ever developed, every lesson we ever learned, every mistake we ever made. It's been waiting here for millions of years for someone worthy to claim it. Amy stared at the device. Worthy? What do you mean? General Brooks' expression became deadly serious. The next threat is coming, Commander. Our quantum archaeologists have seen the probabilities. A species called the Devourers is moving toward human space. They consume entire civilizations, leaving nothing behind but empty worlds. The hologram stepped closer to Amy. They will reach the first human colonies in approximately 50 years. When they do, someone will need to activate the heart of memory. Someone will need to awaken humanity's true nature once again. Amy felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. Why me? Because you've seen what we're capable of, Brooks said. You understand the price of awakening our full potential. And most importantly, you have children of your own. Amy's blood ran cold. She hadn't told anyone on this mission about her 2 daughters back on Earth. The heart responds only to those who understand what we're truly protecting, Brooks explained. Not just human life, but human innocence. Human childhood. The promise that our children will grow up in a universe where they are safe. As they prepared to leave the structure, General Brooks gave Amy one final message. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. The network is always watching, always waiting. And when human children are threatened again, every human in the SC galaxy will answer the call. The last thing Amy saw as they departed was the spiral of matter around the black hole, still spelling out its eternal warning. She realized now that it wasn't just a message to alien species. It was a promise to. Commander Amy Rodriguez sat in the secure briefing room aboard the flagship Endeavour, surrounded by the highest-ranking officers in human space. Admiral Kevin Hayes, the Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces, listened in silence as Amy finished her report. The room had been quiet for 10 minutes since she stopped talking. Finally, Admiral Hayes spoke. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Commander. You're telling us that humanity has secret capabilities that can destroy entire civilizations. That we've already used these capabilities once to completely erase a species from existence. And that these capabilities will automatically activate again if anyone threatens human children. Amy nodded. That's correct, sir. The quantum archaeological technology is still active. The network that connects every human settlement is still functioning. And according to the projections we found, we have about 50 years before the next major threat arrives. General Nancy Foster, head of Colonial Defense, leaned forward. These devourers that the memorial mentioned, what exactly are they? Dr. Susan Miller, who had been granted special clearance for this briefing, pulled up holographic displays. Based on the data we recovered, they're a nomadic species that consumes entire civilizations. Not just the people. They strip planets down to bare rock, absorb all technological knowledge, and move on. They've been doing this for millions of years. And they're heading toward human space? Asked Admiral Hayes. Amy confirmed with a grim nod. The outer colonies will be hit first. By the time they reach Earth, they'll have consumed dozens of human worlds and learned everything about our current technology. The room fell silent again. Everyone was thinking about the implications. Either humanity would face extinction, or they would have to become something that could casually erase entire species from existence. Dr. Miller activated another display. There's something else you need to know. The quantum processing systems we found, they're not just historical records. They're actively monitoring every human settlement in the galaxy. The network knows when colonies are established, when children are born, when any human anywhere is threatened. Colonel Frank Martinez, the intelligence chief, looked troubled. Are you saying we're all being watched? More than watched, Amy said. The network is integrated into our genetics. Every human carries dormant knowledge that can be activated when needed. The peaceful exploratory nature we show to other species. It's real, but it's not our only nature. Admiral Hayes stood and walked to the large viewing window that showed Earth below them. Commander, in your opinion, should we attempt to activate these capabilities preemptively? Prepare for the Devourer threat before it arrives? Amy had been dreading this question. Sir, based on what I saw in the memorials, activating our full capabilities changes us fundamentally. The humans who destroyed the Zephyrians weren't the same people who started that war. They became something else, something that could casually commit genocide and feel justified doing it. She paused, remembering the cold fury in General Brooks' holographic eyes. I believe we should prepare for the threat, but not activate the network until absolutely necessary. Once we cross that line, there may be no going back. General Foster spoke up. What about selective activation? Could we access some of the dormant technologies without triggering the full transformation? Dr. Miller shook her head. The genetic locks are all-or-nothing systems. Partial activation appears to be impossible. It's either remain as we are now, or become what our ancestors were, galaxy-spanning predators who treat other species as potential threats to be eliminated. Admiral Hayes turned back to face the group. Then we need a different approach. Commander Rodriguez, I'm placing you in charge of a new project. You'll work with our best scientists to develop contingency plans for when the Devourers arrive. Amy felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. What kind of contingency plans, sir? 3 scenarios, Hayes said, counting on his fingers. First, conventional defense using our current technology. Second, evacuation protocols to save as many humans as possible. Third, activation of the network if the first 2 options fail. Colonel Martinez raised a concern. Sir, what about the other species in the galaxy? Some of them are our allies. If we activate the network, will we be able to distinguish between threats and friends? The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. Amy remembered the memorial records showing humans systematically erasing any species that had ever been contacted by the Zephyrians, allies and enemies alike. I don't know, Amy admitted. The historical records suggest that once the network is active, humanity views any non-human species as a potential threat. The safeguards seem designed to ensure human survival above all else. Dr. Miller added quietly, there's also the question of what happens after the threat is eliminated. The records show that our ancestors chose to give up their power and start over, but that was their choice. Would we make the same decision? Admiral Hayes was quiet for a long moment, staring out at Earth. Finally, he spoke. There's something else we need to consider. The memorial you found, it wasn't just a historical record. It was a test. Amy looked at him in confusion. A test. Sir? Think about it, Hayes said. Of all the exploration fleets in human space, yours was the one that found the most complete records. Your ship was the one that received the detailed explanations. Your team was the one selected to learn the full truth. That wasn't coincidence. The realization hit Amy like a physical blow. The network chose us. Hayes nodded grimly. The network has been watching, waiting for the right people to discover the truth. People who would understand the responsibility and make the hard choices when necessary. You've been selected, Commander, whether you wanted it or not. Dr. Miller looked pale. If that's true, then the network is already influencing events. It's already active, just not at full power. Amy thought about her daughters back on Earth. 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Rachel. She thought about the children on every human colony, growing up believing they lived in a peaceful universe where their parents explored the stars for knowledge and wonder. Sir, I need to know something, Amy said. If we activate the network, if we become what our ancestors were, will our children still be safe? Not just from external threats, but from us? Admiral Hayes met her eyes. Based on the records you've shown us, the network's primary purpose is protecting human children. But the definition of protection might include things we wouldn't choose to do ourselves. The briefing continued for another 2 hours, but Amy's mind kept returning to one image from the memorials, the final hologram of General Patricia Brooks, standing over the ruins of an entire civilization, completely convinced that she had done the right thing. As the meeting ended, Admiral Hayes pulled Amy aside. Commander, there's one more thing. We've detected quantum fluctuations around several outer colonies, the same signatures you found at the memorial sites. The network isn't just waiting for the devourers. It's already beginning to prepare. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. Preparing how? We're not sure yet. But children in those colonies have been reporting strange dreams. Dreams about building things they don't understand, about technologies that don't exist. The parents think it's just imagination, but the quantum signatures suggest otherwise. As Amy left the briefing room, she realized that the choice might already be out of their hands. The network was awakening on its own, responding to a threat that was still decades away. Humanity's peaceful exploration of the galaxy was living on borrowed time. She thought about the message carved in gravitational waves around the black hole that had once been the Zephyrian homeworld. Remember what happens to those who threaten our children. The universe was about to get a reminder. Amy just hoped that when it was over, there would still be something recognizably human left to protect those children. The stars stretched endlessly outside the viewing windows, beautiful and welcoming. But Amy now knew the truth. Humanity wasn't exploring the galaxy as curious scientists. They were spreading across it like a vast organism, planting seeds that would grow into something terrible and magnificent. When the time came, the universe was vast and full of wonders. But soon, it would learn that the most dangerous thing in it wasn't some ancient evil or cosmic force of destruction. It was a species that loved their children more than they feared their own potential for darkness. And that love would burn away entire civilizations if necessary to keep those children safe.